Okay, we're good.
Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. My name is Leslie Kirby, and I'm the chair of the Community Relations Committee of the Jewish Federation and Jewish Foundation of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. We're delighted to have with us today Tequila Johnson, one of the co-founders of the Equity Alliance in Nashville, as our guest on our virtual Lunch and Learn series. Tequila has many, many accomplishments, and I'm not going to go through them all, but I want to give a brief introduction. Tequila Johnson is an award-winning cause-driven community organizer and strategist whose work focuses on creating equity and increasing civic engagement among Black Americans and other communities of color. She's been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, on CNN and MSNBC, and around the country. She has been named Business's 100 leading African Americans in 2018, Nashville Black 40 Under 40 in 2018, and Nashville Voices 2018 Nashvillian of the Year, among many other distinctions. Why we've invited her here today is because of her work as co-founder and now co-executive director at the Equity Alliance. Welcome, Tequila, and can you start off just by giving us a little bit of an overview for those who might not be familiar of what your goals were with founding Equity Alliance?
Sure. Thank you guys for having me. It's always a pleasure being invited to speak about this work. This is something that I'm so passionate about. The Equity Alliance was founded in 2016, and at the core of our mission was group politics and group economics in the African American community. We realized that there were a lot of issues that were plaguing our community, and we felt like the fight to fight against issues was none-ending. So we decided that we needed to not only fight against issues, but that we needed to fight for something. And that for is our democracy. It is equitable democracy for all Americans to have a voice in what shaping our country looks like. And so we do that in a lot of different ways. We do what I like to call a lot of non-traditional outreach. So we go to nightclubs, we use party buses, we go to churches. We believe in just utilizing the things that we have directly at our fingertips to make this work easier and make this work more inclusive. And so that is what the core of the Equity Alliance is about. Hold on one moment. Can mommy have a few minutes? Thank you, baby. So we, as you can see, we are moms. For the last 3 years, we've done this work in addition to full-time jobs and being full-time moms. And Charlene's married, so full-time wife, and me being a full-time single mom. So this work is something that we realize cannot happen siloed from our day-to-day living. We have to figure out how to integrate this into our everyday lives as women, as moms, as faith leaders. It's going to take all of us in our respective areas. And that is what the alliance piece of the Equity Alliance is about. It's just aligning this to what it means to be a U.S. citizen in day-to-day life. So I'll stop there and let you guys ask questions.
Okay, so I have one question just to kind of get us started, which is, what can we do right now? So I know that one of your priorities for now is voting in the upcoming elections. So what would you say is most needed in terms of allyship right now, in terms of voter education, voter registration, and then voter turnout?
So I hate saying this because I feel like it's limiting, but resources in terms of finances are always the number one thing. It takes $75 per person to register a person to vote and get them to the polls, based off research from Pew Charitable Trust. And one of the things that we see is a lot of state-based nonprofits don't really have the equitable resources to do that level of outreach and engagement year round. So you'll see a huge ramp up around highly contested elections, and then our local elections will fall by the wayside. And that is because national orgs will come in with substantial resources and they will do all of the, kind of co-opting. And then when they leave, we're left in the same position because that work isn't sustainable. But I know oftentimes people don't want to just give money. They want to give time. They want to use their skills. And so for me, I think it depends on your individual skill set. We need people who are amplifying the voices. we need things all the way down to people who are willing to sit with children while we're out doing the work. And so I always tell people to visit our website at theequityalliance.org, sign up to volunteer, and go to one of our volunteer trainings so that you can get engaged and you can use your particular skill set or the things that you're passionate about in this race and in this fight. But I think those are the two most things: is time and treasure, is talent. Time, talents, and treasure.
That makes sense. We've seen a lot in other states where polling places are being closed. Is that something you're concerned about happening here in Tennessee?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are and that's something else that I think would be a great idea for you guys is I went and voted in Belmead 2 years ago because I wanted to see if the polling place around the corner from my house in North Nashville was reflective of the polling place in Belmead. And it was not. There was no line. I walked right in, I got right out. And so I think a good thing could be polling people from North Nashville and driving people from North Nashville and bringing them to Belmead to vote, just to show that community solidarity, but also because we know that there is, for example, we've been able to register in a weekend 1,000 voters. That is unheard of. That's the first time in our history that we've been able to do that as just 2 or 3 people without a large scale initiative. So I think that the momentum around the issues happening is going to really increase voter turnout. And the state and the city and our election commission we saw in 2018, they just aren't prepared for that level of engagement. I do believe a lot of it is intentional, but for the sake of giving them the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to say maybe they just aren't prepared. So I think we will see a lot of polling places closing. We'll see a lot of people turn away from the polls because of long lines. We're going to see a lot of voter suppression tactics being used. There's argument around the absentee ballot initiative. I mean, there are so many fights happening around our democracy right now that you really can look, you can just close your eyes and reach your hand in and pull one out. There's so many. And I know that's not a laughing matter, but that's kind of how I keep myself sane.
What about expanded mail voting? Do you feel like that will be helpful in assuaging some of these problems in Tennessee?
I do. I feel like with what we're seeing right now with this pandemic, people deserve safe voting. People deserve safe voting practices. A lot of the people who work at the polling precincts are our elderly, immune deficient people. And we need to be doing, as a state, we should be doing everything in our power to make sure that our most vulnerable populations, including our immune deficient residents, are safe and that they feel uplifted during this time because, you know, this is going to be a hard time for everybody. And so I'm really hoping that the legislator and the Secretary of State can see that this is a bipartisan issue. People all across the board are suffering from COVID. And so we need to make sure that expanding mail-in ballots happens. We need to make sure that the absentee ballot process is being utilized and that we're educating community members around that. And we need to also hold our elected officials accountable to making sure that they expand those efforts.
One of our members asked in the chat is, did you recently hold a registration drive on Buchanan Street? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes. So, like I said, the core of our work is centered around collective impact. And so what we saw happening were tons of parties being planned, block parties and protests, and nobody was registering voters. So what I did was I put on my organizing hat, which was probably the hardest organizing I've done to date, and brought together all those people and said, let's center this around what is really happening, which is a threat to democracy. And let's make sure that we are putting forth solution-based practices while we're out breaking social distancing rules, so to speak. So we actually were able to register 1,000 people that weekend. And it was literally me and 4 Meharry students.
Wow, that's amazing. Do we know when the court is likely to respond on the appeal about mail-in voting? Do we know when that's likely to happen?
It's crazy. I have a call scheduled for tomorrow morning with the lawyers committee to talk about that. As of now, they have not given a date, but I'm thinking because of the call from the lawyers that they have some good news, that's going to be being heard soon. So I'll definitely send you guys an update so you can share with your group about what's happening. But as of now, no official date has been set. To my knowledge.
Okay. Do you know what's being done to make sure that people who were displaced by the tornado are able to vote? So they might not have home addresses or things like that?
So what we've been doing is we have given away so far about $60,000 in direct assistance to people who were displaced or who have been impacted by the tornado. So our organizers are following up with them every other week to make sure that if they have moved, they've updated their address. We'll be sending out our voter guide on July 3rd to them. So the list of people that we have been in contact with, we have tried to make sure that we're continuing to reach out to them and let them know what's happening around like voter registration and keeping their information up to date.
Perfect. One of the people on the call is an attorney, and he just posted that apparently the Tennessee Supreme Court has decided not to intervene in the appeal. So Erwin, can you chime in? My understanding of that means then that it stands and that anyone in the state will be allowed to have a mail-in ballot. Is that correct?
Well, that means that the Supreme Court is not going to take the case up out of process. So it will be addressed in the Court of Appeals, which could take a fairly long period of time.
Got it. So that's good news in terms of the expanded access for now.
I take it as good news.
Okay. All right. Just trying to follow along in the chat here, people asking questions. Also, I would like to say that Debbie Gould is on this call from the League of Women Voters. So just a shout out to the League.
Hi, Debbie.
Can the two of you maybe talk about joint efforts that you have going on around voting for this fall?
Well, sure. We obviously have the same passions going on. Hey, I think that what we all know is that we all need to hear the same message from lots of different messengers, and that all of us are reaching different parts of the community. One of the things that we worry about a lot is that people feel like that politics is just too messy and they want to sit it out. And this is just not a time to sit out an election. The other thing that we're really working on, encouraging people, and Tequila probably can back this up too, if we want the election commission to be ready in November, we need to give them a good practice run on how to run this election in August. And so even if people feel like this is not a very interesting primary, it's really important that we show up for this election.
Thank you, Debbie. I will say that COVID, we were meeting bi-weekly with the league and some other voting rights advocacy groups. And COVID has really reshaped what our advocacy looks like. But that just makes me realize that I need to schedule a coffee Zoom call with Debbie so that I can make sure that we are in alignment. Because we do very similar work as the league, but like Debbie said, we're reaching different populations, but we need to make sure that our messaging and our efforts are in alignment. So we always support the league in their work, and they've been very, very supportive of us, and we work together at every moment. It's just that COVID has really reshaped what advocacy looks like for us.
Absolutely true.
So we had a community discussion last night around the movie Just Mercy and had somebody from EJI to talk with us after. And one of the things that he talked about in Alabama as a big deal is trying to work with people coming out of prison to reinstate their voter rights. Is that something that you have done work on in our community?
Absolutely. That was one of the things that we worked with the League of Women Voters and a few other groups on, was what does voting rights restoration look like? And Debbie can attest, in the state of Tennessee, it is so nuanced. There's so many different policies and processes that go into it. And so it is definitely an uphill battle. It is one that we are committed to fighting, one that the League and several other groups are committed to fighting. But again, because of COVID, because of everything that's happening with us and our inability to go into the state legislature and actually lobby and have those conversations, it is one of those efforts that is kind of almost stalled. But I do believe that everything that's happening around criminal justice reform this year is going to shape next year's legislative session and give us the opportunity to really push for voter rights restoration. So I am definitely committed to it. We have been working with, we have a group of guys that we have brought on as contractors, and we're calling them the collective impact group. They're guys who have all guys who have gone to prison and been released and have used their platforms to do some sort of community work. We have Robert Sherrill, we have two of the violence interrupters from Gideon's Army, and they are basically our voter rights restoration fellows. So their responsibility is going and finding guys like themselves who are in positions to get their voting rights restored and helping walk them through the process. Because it is a very nuanced process to get your voting rights restored. And I'll be honest, it is different for every person. We've tried, I know the league and the ACLU has tried to outline what their process looks like. And it's difficult because it looks different based off of each individual situation. So our whole mission is around, or mission in this voting rights restoration work, is trying to make sure that we take those policy conversations and we integrate them into grassroots movement building so that the people who are directly impacted on the ground actually understand what that looks like. And they have a voice in helping to shape what that policy can become. And the only way we can do that is by actually getting them engaged. So I think that we are all fighting this thing from different lanes. I know there are people in the legislature every day working, having conversations with people to get that done. We're out on the ground having grassroots conversations. Think Tennessee is putting together different policy papers and briefings just so that we are aware of what's changing. And it's gonna take some years, I'll be honest, to get this really perfected in the state.
Could you talk about beyond kind of the usual suspects, allies in this fight? Are there other potential allies that haven't been tapped into yet that we can target for support on this voter restoration issue?
So I, to be honest with you, in the state of Tennessee, because we are not a battleground state, voting rights and democracy reform is not at the forefront of a lot of our movements. A lot of our movements are centered around issues, like they're issue-based movements. Which is why I think the Equity Alliance gained so much momentum so early, is because we were kind of like, let's focus on the system, not the symptoms of the system, which are the issues. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull people up and create those kind of allies. Because as of now, a lot of, especially in predominantly Black communities, we don't really have many democracy organizations. We don't have any besides the Equity Alliance and maybe like the NAACP. So our whole thing is, how do we take a lot of those issue-based organizations and get them to see how policy has created those issues, or how policy shaped those issues, and getting them to take their fights to the legislator and be more engaged in democracy as a way to combat issues. So it's another uphill battle. It is another, I'll be very transparent, it is another way of me like stretching my leadership capacity, because it's very hard. Because politics, to most people that are directly impacted, isn't the attractive, sexy, for lack of words, fight. People want to fight those fights that are more prevalent and more seen and more appreciated. And policy is just very nuanced and hard to understand. So for us, it's about educating people on, hey, we know that right now people are being gunned down by the police, people are being pulled over, but a lot of the reasons why the police are able to do that is because there are policies in place that protect them. So it is something that I think is going to take a lot of creativity, and it's going to take a lot of support from people like you guys as well.
Yeah, it's a long process. You mentioned criminal justice reform. What are your thoughts on the local response to the recent protests and the kind of possibilities for criminal justice reform here in the short term?
When you say local response, are you referring to the council not cutting the police budget?
That, but also the police chief resigning, possible intervention from the governor's office. Just, it's a whole kind of stew of mess locally.
take my Equity Alliance hat off, my personal opinion is that it's all politics. You know, I think the police chief was gonna retire anyway. So, but I commend the council for pushing him to go ahead and do that, to give people a sense of hope that these protests are leading to something. I think that right now we're in a position to have really clear demands, really solution-based demands. And I think that it's gonna take a broad base of people to do that. And right now, because like I said, Tennessee is such a underinvested in state, because we're not a battleground state, you don't see a lot of solution-based demands that are sustainable or that have been worked on over time. What we see now is a lot of momentum organizing, which is very dangerous because it doesn't always come to fruition, and that can lead to voter apathy. In terms of the council, for example, not cutting the police budget by $10 million, like there were some discrepancies with what was proposed because the firefighters and other public services are roped into that big piece of budget. And so the council was not able to really do that. But in turn, people have shaped the narrative that the council didn't care about Black lives, which is absolutely false. So what I'm seeing is a lot of co-opting. I'm seeing a lot of mismessaging. I'm seeing a lot of momentum organizing. But what I'm not seeing is a lot of collective organizing, a lot of inclusivity, and a lot of community education around what these things can look like. And so we're like, everybody's chopping each other out. And what we should be doing is sitting down, having conversations about what this really looks like and what this means, and extend it beyond just verbiage and words.
Very good point. If you could think about what is ahead, so project 3 to 5 years from now, what would you hope the outcomes of the work you're doing now would be at that time, and who would you be working with as advocates at that point?
One more time.
So if you were projecting into the future, 3 to 5 years from now, what do you hope the outcomes are going to be from the work you're doing now, and who do you hope to be working together with at that point?
So for me, this work, like I think about Dr. Martin Luther King, who, when he died, it was said that he had the heart and the brain of a 90-year-old, because this is some very draining, time-consuming work. It is hard. I worked in corporate America as a project manager and as a portfolio manager, and this is by far harder than that. And that says a lot. So for me, my goal is to be extended out of this work, be doing something else. I would love to get into philanthropy. There are not a lot of Black philanthropists. But I would love to see people who are right now 25, 26, 25 and under doing what I'm doing. But my hope is that we have ended qualified immunity, because that's something that I'm like passionate about. Reparations for African Americans are on the table. That we've talked about the 28th Amendment, or removing corporate dollars out of our politics, and that voter registration is automatic, that people in the state of Tennessee can automatically register to vote. Felon voter disenfranchisement is a thing of the past, and that we're building bridges between our communities, that we're not looking at, oh, this is the Jewish community, this is the Black Baptist community, but that we're having conversations about us as one community, and that these conversations have extended beyond just Zoom calls and just panels, but that we're actually practicing this in our day-to-day living, that we're actually coming to Belle Meade to support efforts from your group, and you guys are coming to North Nashville. And I just want to see Nashville be reflective of what I think It City really is. And for me, It City means it's it for everybody. And so I think the only way we can do that is by having these kinds of calls and conversations. And my prayer is that this will lead to us all just being on one accord.
I agree. Do you feel like the Community Oversight Board is going to have a real voice in the reform movement going forward?
I think that the Community Oversight Board could have a real voice in reform moving forward, but I think the Community Oversight Board needs to be uplifted by people like myself and people on this call who have influence and impact. And I think the Community Oversight Board members, or those who fought for Community Oversight Board, have to be open to having those inclusive conversations and finding points of intersection that we can all agree on so that we can move forward. Right now, what I see is a lot of divisive organizing around policing. And I think that in order for us all to really have a voice, we're going to have to listen to what 60-year-old white women in Belmead think, because they too are a part of democracy. And so for me, as a person who fights for democracy, I believe that Black people need a little bit more, because equitably we just have not had it. But I also believe that me wanting more doesn't mean that I don't need to sit down and talk to the League of Women Voters or talk to the Jewish community, because we are all a part of democracy. And my voice being loud should not diminish anybody else's voice. I just want us all to have the same opportunity to have a voice.
That's great. A couple of the questions that have come on the chat involve running people for office. So does Equity Alliance see as one of its roles to try to identify and nurture and provide support and training for people of color who might run for office? And then a second question came, do you see political office in your future?
So one, the Equity Alliance, we started with the Power of 10 Pack. And Charlene was working at the chamber when we were founded, and she was helping the chamber form its many million packs. And so that was kind of when she brought us together. It was like, we need a Black pack. We need a pack for Black people to get everybody in office. And I was like, we need to be talking to Black people too and educating them and doing. And so we formed two organizations in one day, the Power of 10 Pack and the Equity Alliance. The Power of 10 Pack has recently transformed into the Nashville Justice League. But that was at the beginning what we wanted to do. And then we realized that kind of puts a target on your back. To be honest, like, I like the Equity Alliance work because voter registration is kind of non-threatening. It became a threat, but it's still not as threatening as saying we're like taking people out. But we definitely see that in our future. And I think in 5 years, I would like for Charlene and I to start some sort of Black investment group or something that propels people to run for office. We've talked about that. As for me, no, I don't want to run for office. I don't want to run from the police. I really don't like running at all. I just want to, but hold on, baby, one more moment. I'm almost done. I have been asked by several people nationally, like, your voice is something that's needed in Congress. And this is kind of nuanced, but I believe that there are people who agitate, there are people who activate, and there are people who legislate. And I think that the reason why we don't see much policy reform is because people blend the two. There's a thin line between activism and passing legislation. In order to pass legislation, you have to be able to work across the aisles. You have to be able to understand and dissect legislation, and you have to be able to get the votes. For me, I kind of, in this point in my life, like being a rebel rouser, so to speak. And so I feel like I would have my hands tied in our Republican state legislator, because I would be making all of them mad and I wouldn't get anything done. So maybe 5 years from now, I may mature and grow into a legislator. But as for now, I'm a solutionary. I believe in the solutions that legislation can provide. But I also believe that in order for us to reach that place, we have to have some sort of revolutionary practices. So that's why I coined myself the solutionary.
I like that, a solutionary. One other question that came across is, do you think the police department, and you can focus just here in Nashville rather than nationally, I guess, but do you think it can be reformed, or do we need to start over from the ground up and build something new?
I think we need to start over, but do I think we've been talking about starting over forever, and all we get are amendments. So realistically, I think we're wasting our time arguing about starting over, because what do we start, But I do think that we need to re-envision, and I wish the word defund was more about re-envision what policing looks like. And we do need to take a portion of the resources that we're spending on punishment and use those for actually, mental health and therapeutic things that can help people who, are traumatized. I'm traumatized by the police. I've been beat up by the police before. So for me, I do feel like we need to re-envision what policing looks like. But I also understand that domestic violence is like number one in the state of Tennessee. 1 in 4 women are abused and they have to call the police. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like this utopian idea of no police. I don't think it's something that nobody wants, Black, white, or brown. But I do think we want less punishment. I do think we want more community practices. I do think that people want to re-envision what policing can look like for communities. Like what we want to see is what I see when I drive through Belle Meade, not a police in sight, you know? Like I want to call you to come to my neighborhood. I don't want you just hanging out.
Yes, that makes sense. Are there any other questions for Tequila? Just again, trying to be mindful of her time. She's at her daughter's birthday party, so we don't want to keep her too long. But if there are other final questions from people on the call, speak up or.
I just was wondering, I want to be respectful of your time. I know it's your daughter's birthday, but I would love for you to just say a little bit more about what you said regarding defund the police, which has gotten a lot of attention. That phrase is getting a lot of attention. And I do believe that for a lot of people, what they hear when they see those words is different than what's really meant. If you would say a few more things about the possibilities when we talk about looking at our collective funds as a community, how we might be able to reinvigorate and do things differently.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I would offer you guys, and I would make a connection if needed to reach out to Rashida Fatuga with Gideon's Army and have a deeper conversation. But I do think that at the core of it is policy reform. And I know that people who consider themselves abolitionists say, you know, policy reform is not enough. But I think even if we take money from the police, that does not stop them from killing unarmed Black men. It can be 2 police officers on the force, and they will still find a way to inequitably target communities of color. So I think that we definitely need police reform as well, even though a lot of activists speak out against the word police reform. But I also think that what defund the police is not necessarily ending all policing. It is re-envisioning the way we over police communities. So, for example, in African American communities, over policing leads to a lot of our high recidivism rates. Instead of using those practices, we kind of utilize the restorative justice model that we've seen work in schools, where we're actually taking time to really re-envision what mental health therapy can do to combat a lot of the violence and a lot of the things that we see happening in the community. Using trusted validators, giving people an opportunity to reform their lives before we punish them for the same crimes. Realizing that a lot of times, a lot of the violence and a lot of the issues that we see in African American and Brown communities is a result of downturn economic impact. Like there are economically distressed communities where the only thing that you can do, or the only thing you've been shown to do, is to make money is sell drugs. I mean, I can speak personally. Until I was about 17, I had never met a Black person besides my teachers that had a college degree. Until I was about 15 or 16, the only people that I knew that were wealthy were people who sold drugs or who were rappers or who had gone to play professional sports. And so I couldn't rap, I couldn't play sports, you know, so what other option would I have had besides selling drugs? You know what I mean? So having those kinds of conversations and re-envisioning what the root causes are for a lot of the issues instead of just punishing the issues.
Thank you. And thank you also for the shout out for Gideon's Army, because they are, and we are hoping to have a call with them in one of our upcoming learning sessions.
Great. Yeah, I know that they've done a lot of restorative justice work. And so I'm always very mindful of making sure that we uplift other Black-led organizations in these spaces, because we know that our work is centered around democracy and systemic redesign, but we need those issues to drive what those systems of redesign look like. So,
Leslie, let's go ahead. We can close with Erwin's last question.
We had one last question, which is, can you talk to us about efforts to create a more participatory budgeting process for the Metro budget?
So I will say this. The Defund the Police Budget Committee kind of overshadowed the work of Stand Up Nashville that was led by another woman, Odessa Kelly. You guys should get her on a call too, and I can make the connection. But Odessa, for the last, oh my God, since I've known her, has really been working to reform what our budgeting process looks like. I had no clue how the Metro budget works. Nobody has a clue how the Metro budget works besides Odessa that I know of. And I think that's why a lot of the issues around the defund the police was a really nuanced process, because a lot of the things that they were putting out were impossible because of our charter and the way our budget is structured. And so I think that what Odessa has is a plan to work against state preemption and really build participatory processes for Nashville. And it is by far the most comprehensive that I've ever seen. And they like nerd out on this stuff. So I like follow their lead. Like, I don't want to do everything. I just want to, these girls want to say, hey, uh-oh.
Oh, we might have
lost
Oh.
them.
we'll give it another. So yeah, I'll just follow up on the shout out to Odessa Kelly. Yeah, she and Stand Up Nashville also do a great job. I met Odessa initially through the work with Noah, and we will work to get her as one of our upcoming guests as well. We'll give Tequila another minute to see if she can get back. And if not, I think we'll go ahead and let her go celebrate with her daughter.
And Tequila, if you can still hear us, happy birthday to your daughter. Thank you for joining us today. I think we lost her.
I think we may have. All right. Well, yes.
All right. So thanks, everyone. I know it's a bit shorter than usual today because of Tequila's other commitment, but I hope you found it interesting and engaging. I thought her thoughts about reform were really interesting and powerful, and we will definitely be planning on partnering around voter registration and voter turnout in the fall.
If you want, Leslie, we could take a moment, we could unmute and see if anyone has just in a small conversation while we have some people on. Oh, she's back. She's back. All right, we'll let her come back in and share her closing remarks. Okay.
Sorry, my phone died.
That's all right. Did your daughter want to say hello?
Chrissy, you want to say hello?
We could all sing to her.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Hold on, baby. I'm gonna let you hear.
Are you guys at Nashville Shores?
Yeah, they're at the water park. Yeah. No,
Happy
not
birthday.
Nashville Shores, the water park.
How old is she, Tequila?
How old are you?
She just turned 6 yesterday. Hold on. She's putting an AirPod in. Can you hear?
Can you?
Hi.
Happy
Hi,
birthday.
happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. We had to get her to sit down because her nose is actually scraped and bleeding.
Oh no.
All right. Well,
Well, she's a doll, and bless your heart for giving us your time.
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Happy birthday. Enjoy the celebration.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
So sweet. So yeah, if anyone has, I do want to make sure that I let everyone know that, if Tequila's still.
Still on?
Tequila, did you have more you wanted to share? Do you have some closing comments?
No, I just wanted to say thank you guys for your time and for your allyship and your continued support of the Equity Alliance. I appreciate everything you all have done, everything you all continue to do, and looking forward to whatever ways you want to be engaged. Please feel free, Deborah, to share my email address with everyone. If anybody has any questions or wants to call me and just talk, I'm open to that as well. I'm gonna go join the kids at the water.
Enjoy the celebration, and we will stay in touch, and we will continue to support all of your efforts. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Bye.
So just as a reminder for those that are still on the call, we will not have a call next week. July 3rd will be off for the long weekend, and then we will be back And we have several guests that we are scheduling. Debbie Gould with the League of Women Voters will be one of our guests for July. And as mentioned, we've been reaching out to groups like Gideon's Army. We also will have a representative of the Muslim community. I don't exactly know who yet, but we will have a conversation with the Muslim community during one of our calls in July. And then if people have other suggestions, I am open to thoughts. You can either share them here now or email me if you have ideas of other guests you'd like to see. Aren't we on perpetual, Erwin? Yeah, perpetual long weekend, yeah. It is an interesting time.
It is. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Have a great
Oh,
weekend. Oh, do we have another question?
Well, this is more of a just sort of FYI. I'm sure many of you have seen in the news the possibility of Israel's decision on annexation that may come next week. So we will be sharing general information on that. And then if at some point we can think about having an actual program. But first we'll start by just the beginning of next week, we'll be sending out through the Federation some information, some articles, some webinars that have been recorded, and just some basic information to help people understand the basic issue. And then we can decide if we want to have a specific conversation about it.
Deb, these calls have been great. I'm just wondering if you're any thoughts about summarizing what we learn on these calls for the observer, so that the broader community that were on the calls might learn as well. I don't see Barb Dabb on the call, but maybe we can engage in some sharing of our notes with others.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
We have been recording, the sessions have been recorded and they are available on YouTube. And I do know that some people do watch them later, but having a short summary of each one that could be shared is also a great idea. And I'll work with Barbara on something for August, but it's, like I said, the recordings are being viewed by some, but sort of an executive summary of some of them is probably a great idea.
Yeah, I think that is good. And Erwin, I'm writing down the names that you just posted for us to think about for future speakers. All right. Thanks again, everyone. And we won't see you next week, but we hope to see you back again on July the 10th.
The 10th, it'll be July.
10th,
Our next
yes.
session will be on July the 10th.
All right. Bye, everyone. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you all. Shabbat shalom.